The village is burning. That is the first thing anyone notices. And in the smoke, through the screams, through the soldiers dragging men from their homes, a young healer named Sorel does something no one expects. She walks directly toward the Alpha King. He sits upon a warhorse black as coal, surrounded by wolves the size of small bears, flanked by guards whose armor bears the sigil of House Thornmark. His face is carved from stone and war. Scars cross his jaw, his brow, his throat. Eyes the color of molten silver sweep the destruction with cold precision. This is Alpha King Caspian, the conqueror of the north, the man who crushed 3 kingdoms in 5 years. A child screams behind Sorel. Lyrian. The soldiers have her by the arm, dragging her toward the cages with the other orphans. Sorel does not think. She steps into the king's path and raises her hands, and then she speaks. The words come from somewhere old and deep, rising through her chest like water from a forgotten well. She does not know what they mean. She only knows her grandmother sang them to her every night before sleep, and they feel right, and they feel true. The ancient tongue rolls off her lips like prayer, like prophecy. The king's horse rears. The wolves go silent. Every soldier in the square stops moving as if frozen by winter itself. And the Alpha King's face does something no one has ever seen. It cracks. His silver eyes widen. His breath stops. The blood drains from his scarred features as he stares at this woman, this nobody, this village healer in a threadbare dress who just spoke the sacred words that only one person in all the realm should ever know. The Luna's vow. The ancient binding that only his true mate could speak. Everyone in the square expects the king to kill her, to have her dragged away in chains for blasphemy, to burn her alongside the village she tried to protect. Instead, the Alpha King dismounts. Instead, he walks toward her slowly, as if approaching something holy. Instead, he kneels. The silence that follows could shatter glass, because now the entire kingdom is wondering the same thing. Why would the most feared ruler in the realm kneel before an unknown village healer who just spoke the words only his fated Luna could know? Sorel's hands were still shaking 3 hours after she buried the last of the fevered dead. She wiped them on her apron, but the tremor remained. It had been like this for 6 days now, ever since the sickness swept through Ardenvale and the bodies started piling faster than the living could dig graves. She was 23 years old, and she had never felt so tired. The cottage behind her was small, barely more than 2 rooms and a hearth, but it was hers. She had built a life here after grandmother Isolde passed. 2 winters ago, she had descended from the mountains with nothing but a satchel of dried herbs and the old song still echoing in her head. "Wait for me at the edge of the world," grandmother used to sing, tucking the blanket beneath Sorel's chin. "And I will find you there." But grandmother was ash now, scattered across the high meadows where the wildflowers grew, and Sorel had stopped waiting for anyone to find her. She pushed through the door and stopped. Lyrian sat at the table, cross-legged on the chair, eating bread with both hands. The child was 8 years old with tangled copper hair and eyes too large for her face. She had appeared on Sorel's doorstep 7 months ago, half-starved and silent, and had simply never left. "You are supposed to be sleeping," Sorel said. Lyrian shrugged, mouth full. "Could not sleep. Too many dead people today." Sorel's chest tightened. She crossed to the child and smoothed the tangled hair back from her face. "You should not have been watching." "I was helping," Lyrian protested. "I carried water." That she had. Bucket after bucket, despite Sorel's protests, despite the weight of it, despite the way her small arms had trembled by the end. "You helped," Sorel agreed softly. "You helped, very much." A horn sounded in the distance. Both of them went still. "That is not the village horn," Lyrian whispered. "No," Sorel said. "It was not." The village horn was high and clear, used to call farmers from the fields. This sound was deeper, darker, the kind of sound that made something ancient in her blood want to run. "Stay here," she told Lyrian. She was out the door before the child could argue. The village square was already in chaos when Sorel arrived. People running, shouting, pressing themselves against buildings. She pushed through the crowd and her breath caught. Soldiers, dozens of them, mounted on war horses pouring through the main road like a black river. Their armor bore the sigil of the Northern Kingdom. The wolves that paced alongside them were massive, silent, moving like shadows given teeth. And at the front, on a horse that dwarfed every other, sat the man Sorel had only heard about in whispered warnings. Alpha King Caspian. She had heard the stories. Everyone had. The boy who had become Alpha at 17 after his father's death. The conqueror who had united the fractured northern territories through blood and strategy. The king who had never found his Luna, whose wolf was said to be unstable, violent, barely contained. Looking at him now, Sorel believed every word. He was enormous. Not just tall, but broad. Built for war. His shoulders carrying weight that had nothing to do with the dark fur cloak draped across them. Scars marked his face like a map of violence. His eyes swept the village with cold silver assessment, seeing everything, dismissing most of it. Then his gaze found the sick tents. Fever? His voice carried across the square like thunder. The village elder stumbled forward, trembling. Yes, Your Majesty. 6 days now. We have lost 43. And the healer? The elder's eyes darted to Sorel. She does her best, Your Majesty, but it spreads too fast. The king's expression did not change. His gaze moved past the elder, past the sick tents, and landed on something behind Sorel. Her blood went cold. The orphan cages. She turned. Soldiers were already moving through the village, pulling children from doorways, from hiding spots, from the arms of screaming mothers. Lyrian. No. Sorel pushed through the crowd, but she was too slow, too far, and she watched in horror as a soldier grabbed Lyrian by the arm and dragged her toward the iron cage where a dozen other children already huddled. Lyrian screamed her name. Sorel! Something broke inside her. She did not remember making the decision to move. She did not remember pushing past the guards. She only remembered suddenly standing in the path of the Alpha King's horse, hands raised, Lyrian's screams still ringing in her ears, and then the words came. Old words. Words grandmother had sung to her every night. Words she had never understood but had always felt in her bones. She spoke them without thinking, and the world stopped. The king's horse reared, the wolves went silent. The soldiers froze mid-motion, heads turned, and faces pale, and the Alpha King stared at her with an expression she could not name. You, he breathed, where did you learn those words? Sorel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her pulse was racing, her hands were shaking. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to take back whatever she had just done. But she thought of Lyrian in that cage. She thought of grandmother's voice, soft and certain. She lifted her chin. Release the children, she said, and I will tell you anything you wish to know. Caspian had searched for 15 years. He had consulted every seer, every scholar, and every ancient text in every kingdom he conquered. He had climbed sacred mountains and descended into forgotten temples. He had bled on altars and howled at moons and stood at the edge of the world waiting for an answer that never came. And now, in a dying village at the edge of nowhere, a woman in a threadbare dress had just spoken the Luna's vow directly to his face. His wolf lunged forward so violently that Caspian nearly lost control. Mine! The beast snarled inside him. Ours. Finally. He forced the wolf back with brutal effort, his hands tightening on the reins until his knuckles went white. His blood was burning. For the first time in years, his vision had sharpened to a single point. Her. She was small compared to him. Most people were. But there was nothing small about the way she stood, chin lifted, eyes blazing with a ferocity that had no business existing in a village healer facing down a king and his army. Her hair was dark, falling loose around her shoulders. Her skin was sun-touched, her hands calloused from work. And her eyes. Caspian could not look away from her eyes. They were the color of autumn, brown and gold and deep, and they held absolutely no fear. She had demanded the children's release, like she had any right to demand anything, like she was the one with an army at her back. His wolf loved it. Caspian dismounted slowly. He was aware of the silence, of the watching eyes, of his soldiers' confusion. He was aware that he should arrest this woman for speaking the sacred words without permission, for daring to address him without kneeling. He walked toward her instead. Up close, she was even more striking. A thin scar crossed her collarbone, visible above her dress. Her hands were steady now, though he could smell the adrenaline still coursing through her. She smelled like herbs and wood smoke, and something underneath that made his wolf pace and whine. Mate, the beast insisted. She is our mate. Where did you learn the Luna's vow? Caspian asked. His voice came out rougher than he intended. I do not know what that is. He almost laughed. She did not know. She had just spoken the most sacred words in his kingdom. Words that had not been heard in 3 generations. Words that only the true Luna of the Thornmark bloodline could ever know. And she did not know. The words you just spoke, he said carefully. Where did you learn them? Her jaw tightened. She glanced toward the cage where the copper-haired child was pressed against the bars, watching with wide, terrified eyes. Release the children first, she said. Then we talk. Caspian's advisors would have been horrified. High Priest Valdrin, in particular, would have counseled immediate imprisonment. But Valdrin was not here, and Caspian's wolf was howling. Release the children, he said, without turning around. A ripple of confusion moved through his soldiers. Your Majesty? General Torvrin stepped forward. The quota for the northern labor camps is suspended, Caspian interrupted. For this village, indefinitely. Silence. Then the cages opened and children spilled out, running toward parents, toward homes, toward anywhere that was not iron bars. The copper-haired girl sprinted directly to the woman and threw her arms around her waist. Something in Caspian's chest twisted. The woman held the child close, one hand smoothing her hair, and for a moment her fierce expression softened into something painfully tender. Then she looked up at him, and the steel returned. My grandmother taught me, she said. Songs. She called them the old songs. She sang them to me every night when I was small. She said they were important. She never told me why. Your grandmother. Caspian's mind was racing. What was her name? Isolde. The woman hesitated. She raised me in the mountains. She never spoke of where she came from. She died 2 winters ago. Isolde. The name struck him like a physical blow. He had heard it before. Once. In a passage from an ancient text that Valdrin had dismissed as myth. The last handmaiden of the Luna Queen. The one who had fled the palace the night the queen died, taking something precious with her. Something that was never found. Caspian looked at the woman before him, really looked, and for the first time in 15 years he felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. You will come with me, he said, to the palace. Her eyes narrowed. I will not leave my village. My people need me. Your people are dying of fever. My healers can help them. I will send word before we depart. She hesitated. He could see her weighing it, the suspicion warring with the practical need. The child was still clinging to her. The child comes too, the woman said finally, or I do not move from this spot. His wolf practically purred. Agreed, Caspian said. He turned to his soldiers. Prepare the royal carriage, and send word to the palace healers. They ride for this village within the hour. He looked back at her. One more question. She waited, tense. Your name, Caspian said. I would know it. Sorelle, she said quietly. My name is Sorelle. Sorelle. Caspian tasted the name and felt his wolf settle for the first time in 15 years. The palace was a living nightmare dressed in stone and gold. Sorelle stood in the entrance hall. Lyrian's hand clutched tight in hers and tried very hard not to show how badly she wanted to run. The ceiling soared impossibly high, carved with wolves and moons and symbols she did not recognize. Servants moved silently, eyes averted, their footsteps swallowed by carpets that cost more than her village's entire yearly harvest. She did not belong here. Every instinct screamed it. Every glance from the nobles gathered along the edges of the hall confirmed it. They looked at her threadbare dress, her calloused hands, her wild hair, and their faces said what their mouths did not. Peasant. Outsider. Mistake. The king walked ahead of her, his stride long and certain, and the crowd parted for him like water around a stone. He had barely spoken during the journey. Sorelle had spent most of it in the carriage with Lyrian, watching the landscape change from dying farmland to dense forest, to the sharp black mountains where the palace crouched like a predator waiting. Lyrian tugged her hand. That man is staring at us. Sorelle followed her gaze. A tall figure stood at the base of a sweeping staircase, dressed in robes of deep burgundy, a heavy pendant hanging from his neck. His face was narrow, his eyes sharp, his silver hair swept back from a high forehead. He was looking at Sorelle like she was an insect he intended to crush. Ah. High Priest Valdrin stepped forward, his smile thin and unwelcoming. So this is the village woman who spoke the sacred words. The king turned. Valdrin. Something passed between them. Something Sorelle could not read. Your Majesty. Valdrin inclined his head, but his eyes never left Sorelle. I confess myself surprised. You have brought commoners into the palace before for questioning, but never with such ceremony. She is not here for questioning, Caspian said. She is here as my guest. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sorelle felt the weight of every gaze in the hall, felt the whispers beginning at the edges, felt Lyrian press closer to her side. Your guest. Valdrin's smile sharpened. How generous. And the words she spoke? The Luna's vow? You believe she is truly, I believe, Caspian interrupted, that she will be treated with the respect due to anyone under my protection. Is that clear? Valdrin's jaw tightened. Of course, Your Majesty. He stepped back, but his eyes found Sorelle's one more time. His expression promised that this conversation was far from over. The king turned to Sorelle. You will be given chambers in the East Wing, the child as well. Anything you need, you have only to ask. And if what I need is to go home, Sorelle asked, then you are free to leave whenever you wish. She did not believe him, but she also did not have a choice. Her village was being tended by royal healers. Lyrian was safe beside her. And until she understood what these words meant, why they had affected the king so profoundly, why grandmother had taught them to her and never explained, she could not leave. Then I will stay, Sorelle said. For now. The king nodded once. A servant will show you to your rooms. Rest. Eat. Tomorrow we will talk. He turned and walked away, and Sorelle watched him go. This man made of scars and silence and barely contained power. Her wolf, dormant for so long she sometimes forgot it existed, stirred restlessly beneath her skin. She ignored it. Come, she told Lyrian, let us see what kind of cage they have prepared for us. They were led through corridors that wound deeper into the palace, past doors that whispered secrets, past windows that looked out onto courtyards and training yards. Finally, the servant stopped before a heavy wooden door and pushed it open. The room beyond was larger than Sorel's entire cottage. A bed dominated one corner, draped in furs and silks. A fireplace crackled with warm light. A table held fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and a pitcher of wine. Lyrian gasped, "Is this real?" Sorel stepped inside slowly, running her fingers along the carved wooden bedpost. It seemed real, but so did traps, until they snapped shut. "Stay here," she told Lyrian. "Eat. I need to think." She moved to the window and looked out. The view showed a training yard below, currently empty, the ground scarred with the marks of combat. Beyond it, the black mountains rose against a darkening sky. "Grandmother," she thought, "what did you do? What did you hide from me?" A knock sounded at the door. Sorel turned. Lyrian had frozen mid-bite, a piece of bread still in her hand. "Come in," Sorel called. The door opened and a woman stepped through. She was perhaps 40, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back severely, wearing the simple gray dress of a palace servant. But something about the way she moved, the way she held herself, suggested she was more than she appeared. The woman closed the door behind her. "You do not know who you are," she said quietly. "Do you?" Sorel's hand moved instinctively toward the knife at her belt. "I know exactly who I am," she said. The woman shook her head. "You know who Isolde raised you to be, but you do not know who you were born to be." Her eyes were sad, heavy with something Sorel could not name. "Your grandmother was my sister. I have been waiting 23 years for someone to speak the Luna's vow again." She took a slow breath. "And now I must decide whether to tell you the truth or protect you from it." Sorel's breath caught. "What truth?" she demanded. The woman looked at her for a long moment. Then she stepped closer and lowered her voice. "The truth that the last Luna Queen did not die childless," she said. "The truth that she had a daughter. The truth that Isolde smuggled that daughter out of the palace the night the queen was murdered and hid her in the mountains where no one would ever think to look." She paused. "The truth," she said softly, "that you are not a village healer, Sorel. You are the last living heir to the Luna bloodline, and the man who just brought you to this palace has been searching for you his entire life." Caspian had not slept in 3 days. This was not unusual. Sleep had always been difficult, his wolf too restless, his mind too loud. But since bringing Sorel to the palace, the restlessness had transformed into something else entirely: hunger. His wolf paced constantly now, pressing against his control, demanding he go to her, claim her, complete the bond that had been waiting 15 years to form. It took every ounce of discipline he possessed to remain in his chambers, to attend council meetings, to pretend that his entire world had not shifted on its axis the moment a village healer spoke the sacred words. He stood at his window, watching dawn break over the mountains. The training yard below was empty. He should be there. He always trained at dawn. It was the only thing that quieted his wolf, that burned off the dangerous energy that built inside him like pressure in a sealed vessel. But today, he could not focus. A knock sounded at his door. "Enter." General Torvrin stepped inside. "The woman has requested an audience, Your Majesty." Caspian turned. "She has been here 4 days. She has not requested anything. She is requesting now." Torvrin paused. "She says she has questions. She says she will not eat until you answer them." Something between amusement and concern moved through Caspian's chest. "The child? Eating well?" Torvrin's mouth twitched. "She has befriended 3 kitchen maids and a stable boy. She is teaching them a card game that I suspect involves cheating." Caspian almost smiled. "Tell the woman I will see her in the solar." 1 hour. He used the hour to bathe, to dress, to compose himself into something resembling a king rather than a man whose wolf was howling for its mate. By the time he entered the solar, he had rebuilt every wall he possessed. Then he saw her, and they crumbled. She stood by the window, silhouetted against the morning light, and she was not wearing the threadbare dress anymore. Someone had given her clothes that fit. A simple gown of deep green that made her autumn eyes burn brighter. Her dark hair had been brushed and braided, though pieces still escaped around her face. She looked like she belonged here. The thought struck him like a blow. "You wanted to speak with me," he said. Sorel turned. Her expression was guarded, but beneath the wariness he could see the sleepless shadows under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. "Brindis told me things," she said. "4 days ago. She has not spoken to me since." Brindis. His jaw tightened. The woman had been a servant in the palace for 30 years, so quiet that Caspian had never thought to question her presence. Now he understood why. She is the only one who knows the truth. "She knows more than you," Sorel said. "And you brought me here. So you will tell me what she will not." "What did she tell you?" he asked. "That I am the daughter of the last Luna Queen. That my grandmother smuggled me out of the palace the night my mother was murdered. That you have been searching for me your entire life." Sorel's voice did not waver. "Is it true?" "Yes." The word hung between them. He watched her absorb it, watched the impact move through her body. "Why?" she demanded. "Why were you searching?" "Because without a Luna," Caspian said carefully, "an alpha king cannot fully control his wolf. The bond stabilizes us, grounds us. Without it," he stopped. "Without it, what?" He turned to face her. "Without it, we become dangerous. Unstable. The longer we go unbonded, the worse it becomes." His voice dropped. "I am 32 years old. I have been alpha since 17. 15 years without a Luna. 15 years of my wolf growing more volatile, more difficult to contain." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "That is why you search. Not for love. For control." The word stung more than it should have. "Yes." Sorel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "And if I refuse? If I take Lyrian and leave and never speak the Luna's vow again, then you are free to go." She stared at him. "You would let me walk away." "I already told you." Caspian held her gaze. "You are not a prisoner. Whatever Brindis told you, whatever you have decided about what kind of man I am, I will not force a bond that is not chosen freely." Something shifted in her expression. The suspicion remained, but beneath it, something softer flickered. "The Queen Mother," she said quietly. "The night my mother died. Brindis said she was killed by someone inside the palace, someone who wanted the Luna line ended." She paused. "Who?" Caspian's blood went cold. It was a question he had asked himself 1,000 times. A question with an answer he had never wanted to believe. "I do not know," he said, "but I intend to find out." Sorel studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped closer, close enough that he could count the flecks of gold in her autumn eyes. "If I stay," she said, "if I help you find the truth about my mother, you will protect Lyrian. You will protect my village. You will give me your word as king." Caspian looked down at her, this woman who had walked into the path of his warhorse and demanded the release of children. His wolf recognized her completely. So did he. "You have my word," he said. She extended her hand. "Then we have a bargain, Alpha King." He took it. The moment their skin touched, something happened. A jolt. A recognition. A sound like a key turning in a lock that had been sealed for 15 years. Caspian heard his wolf howl, felt power rush through his veins, saw Sorel's eyes widen as she felt it too. She pulled her hand back sharply. "What was that?" she breathed. Caspian stared at his own palm, still tingling from the contact. I do not know, he said. But for the first time in 15 years, his wolf had gone completely, perfectly still. 3 weeks passed, and Sorel learned that palaces were their own kind of wilderness. The rules were different here. The predators wore silk instead of fur. The dangers came wrapped in polite smiles and honeyed words, but the instinct was the same. Watch. Listen. Trust nothing. She spent her mornings with Brindis, learning about the Luna bloodline, about the sacred bond, about the history that had been hidden from her for 23 years. Learning about her mother, Luna Queen Astrene, who had been beloved by the people and murdered in her own chambers on a winter night, while her newborn daughter slept in the next room. The Luna's gift is not just words, Brindis explained one morning. It is connection. To the pack, to the land, to your alpha. The true Luna does not just stabilize the king. She sees what others cannot. She feels what others hide. Sorel stared at her hands. And my mother had this gift? She was the strongest Luna in 3 generations. Brindis's voice softened. She could walk into a room and know instantly who was lying, who was afraid, who was planning betrayal. It is why she had to die. Sorel looked up sharply. What do you mean? There are those who prefer kings without lunas, kings who can be manipulated, kings whose wolves can be exploited. Brindis met Sorel's eyes. Your mother saw something, something she should not have seen, and she paid for it with her life. What did she see? I do not know. Brindis shook her head. She only told Isolde to take you and run if anything happened to her. So she did. Sorel absorbed this slowly. And the king? Does he know? He knows his father grieved so deeply after your mother's death that he faded within the year. He knows the palace told him it was assassination by southern enemies. He knows nothing of what your mother truly discovered. Sorel thought about Caspian's face when she had asked about the murder. The cold fury barely contained beneath the surface. He suspects, she said. Yes, Brindis agreed, but suspicion is not proof. And whoever killed your mother is still here, still watching, still waiting. The words settled into Sorel's bones like ice. She spent her afternoons with Lyrian, who had transformed in the 3 weeks since their arrival. The child who had been silent and wary now laughed freely, racing through the palace gardens, filling her pockets with stolen pastries. Sorel watched her now, chasing butterflies through the rose garden, and felt her heart crack with gratitude. This was why she stayed. Not the bond, not the power, not even the truth about her mother. This child, happy and safe and whole. She is flourishing. Sorel turned. Caspian stood a few feet away, watching Lyrian. She had seen him nearly every day since their bargain. Brief encounters in corridors, longer conversations in the solar. He answered her questions with careful honesty. He listened to her observations about palace politics with surprising attention. He never touched her again, but she felt him watching her, always watching. She makes friends easily, Sorel said. She did not before. She was so quiet when she came to me. What happened to her family? Fever took them. She was the only one left. Caspian was silent for a moment. And you took her in. She needed someone. I was there. Sorel shrugged. It was not complicated. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his silver eyes made her breath catch. You see things simply, he said quietly. Good and bad. Right and wrong. Help or do not help. Is that a criticism? No. His voice dropped. It is something I have not encountered in a very long time. The moment stretched between them, warm and dangerous. She looked away first. The council meets this evening, she said, Brindis told me, to discuss the northern border situation. It does not concern you. Everything in this palace concerns me now. Sorel met his eyes. If I am to be whatever you need me to be, I should understand how this kingdom functions. Approval crossed his face. The council chamber, then, he said. Sunset. Do not expect a warm welcome. She smiled slightly. I never do. The council chamber was exactly as unwelcoming as she expected. 12 men sat around a massive stone table. High Priest Valdrin occupied the seat at the king's right hand, his expression a mask of contempt whenever his gaze found Sorel. She stood near the door, silent, watching, learning. The northern clans grow bolder, General Torvrin was saying. They test our borders weekly now. Small raids, burned watchtowers. They are probing for weakness. Then we crush them, another council member said. Lord Harvin, broad and red-faced. Show them the consequences of defiance. We cannot afford another war, Torvrin countered. The treasury is strained. We need peace. Valdrin's voice cut through the argument like a blade. What we need is peace. He looked at Caspian. And the surest path to peace is alliance, marriage, a union with the northern clans that would bind them to the crown permanently. Sorel felt her stomach tighten. You suggest I take a northern bride? Caspian said flatly. I suggest you consider all options, Your Majesty. Valdrin's gaze slid to Sorel. Before making decisions based on sentiment rather than strategy. The air in the chamber changed, a pressure building, a tension that had nothing to do with politics. Caspian's hands were flat on the table. His breathing had slowed. His eyes had gone darker, the silver bleeding toward something else. No. His wolf was rising. She moved before thinking, stepping forward, her hand finding his shoulder. The contact was light, barely there, but the effect was immediate. Caspian inhaled sharply, his eyes cleared, his hands relaxed. The council stared. Valdrin's expression twisted into something ugly before smoothing back into careful neutrality. Perhaps, he said softly, we should adjourn for the evening. The council filed out slowly. Valdrin was the last to leave, pausing at the door to look back at her with eyes that promised nothing good. Then they were alone. What was that? Sorel demanded. Caspian did not answer immediately. He stood with his back to her, shoulders rigid. It happens, he said finally, when I am challenged, when I am angry. The wolf rises and I cannot control it. He turned. His face was pale beneath the scars. Sometimes. Yes. Sorel stared at him. This was the instability Brindis had warned her about. I touched you, she said slowly, and it stopped. Yes, that is the bond, the beginning of it. His voice was rough, untrained, incomplete. But yes. Sorel's mind was racing. She thought about Valdrin's face when Caspian's control had slipped, the calculation in his eyes. He wanted you to lose control, she said, in front of the council. Caspian's jaw tightened. Yes, he has been waiting for years. Waiting for what? For proof that I am unfit? For justification to name a successor. His eyes met hers. For an excuse to remove me from the throne. Sorel felt cold understanding settle into her bones. Valdrin, she said, he does not just disagree with you. He wants to destroy you. Caspian nodded slowly. And whoever killed my mother, Sorel continued, whoever wanted the Luna line ended, whoever benefits from kings without lunas, from kings who can be manipulated, from kings whose wolves can be exploited. She stopped. Caspian finished the thought for her. Yes, he said quietly. I suspect him too. The proof came 3 days later, and it came from the most unexpected source. Lyrian. Caspian found her in the stable, curled between 2 hay bales with tear tracks still drying on her cheeks. She startled when she saw him, scrambling backward like a cornered animal. He stopped immediately, held up his hands, spoke softly. I am not here to hurt you. I am looking for Sorel. Have you seen her? Lyrian shook her head, but her eyes were too wide, her breathing too fast. Something was wrong. Caspian crouched slowly, making himself smaller. When I was young, he said quietly, I used to hide in the stables too. The horses did not care that I was the prince. It was peaceful. Lyrian watched him warily. What frightened you? Caspian asked. For a long moment she did not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, The priest. Caspian went very still. Valdrin? Lyrian nodded. He came to find me. He said he had questions about Sorel. He said if I did not tell him, something bad would happen to her. Caspian's wolf roared forward so violently that he had to close his eyes and breathe through it. When he opened them again, Lyrian had pressed herself further back against the hay. I am not angry at you, he said carefully. I am angry at him. What did you tell him? Nothing. Lyrian's chin lifted slightly. I told him I did not remember. I told him I was too young. He got mad and left. Pride moved through Caspian's chest. You were brave. Sorel taught me. She said bad people always want something, and the best weapon is not giving it to them. Lyrian's eyes filled again. But he is going to hurt her, is he not? Because I did not tell him? No. The word came out harder than Caspian intended. No one is going to hurt Sorel. I will not allow it. Lyrian studied him for a long moment. Then she said, You love her. It was not a question. Caspian did not know how to answer. Love was not a word he had ever applied to himself. But when he thought about Sorel, about her fierce eyes and steady hands, and the way she had walked into his path and demanded justice for children she barely knew, something shifted in his chest. I will protect her, he said finally. That is all that matters. Lyrian nodded slowly. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I found this, she said, in the priest's study. After he left me, I followed him. He dropped it, and I took it before he noticed. Caspian took the paper with trembling hands, unfolded it, and felt his entire world collapse. It was a letter, dated 23 years ago, written in a hand he did not recognize, addressed to a name he did. Lord Valdrin. We have located the Luna's daughter. The handmaiden Isolde has taken her to the eastern mountains. Shall we pursue? Below the question, in Valdrin's own distinctive script, was the reply. No. Let them believe they have escaped. The child is worthless without the words. The grandmother will die eventually, and the knowledge with her. Focus on ensuring the king remains unstable. An uncontrolled alpha serves our purposes far better than a bonded one. Caspian read it twice, 3 times, 23 years. Valdrin had known. He had known Sorel existed. He had known she was the Luna heir. And he had deliberately let her remain hidden, had deliberately allowed Caspian to suffer 15 years of deteriorating control, had deliberately engineered the conditions that made the Alpha King weak. And the letter confirmed something worse. He had ordered the Luna Queen's death. Caspian stood slowly. His hands were shaking. And Sorel was alone in the palace with him right now. Where is she? Caspian demanded. Lyrian's face went pale. The priest came back while you were looking for me. He told a servant he needed to speak with her. He said it was about her mother. Where? The East Tower. The old Luna chambers. Caspian was already running. The East Tower had been sealed for 23 years. Caspian crashed through the door and took the stairs 3 at a time, his wolf lending him speed. The Luna chambers were at the top. The rooms where his father's mate had lived. The rooms where she had died. The rooms where Sorel's mother had been murdered. He burst through the final door and stopped. Sorel stood at the center of the room, her back to the wall, Valdrin between her and the only exit. The priest held a blade, coated with something dark and shimmering. Wolf's bane. One cut, and Sorel would be paralyzed. Helpless. Unable to shift, unable to fight. unable to scream. "Step away from her!" Caspian's voice came out as a growl. Valdrin turned slowly. His composure had cracked. His eyes were wild. "You found it," he said. "The letter. I can see it in your face. I found everything. Then you understand why this must happen." Valdrin's voice rose. "The Luna line must end. An uncontrolled king is a controllable king. I have spent 30 years building this kingdom's power. I will not have some village peasant destroy my life's work by stabilizing you." "She is the rightful Luna," Caspian snarled. "She is my mate. She is a threat." Valdrin lunged. Caspian shifted. The transformation was instant, explosive, fueled by rage and terror. The massive silver wolf crashed into Valdrin, knocking the blade from his hand, sending them both sprawling across the stone floor. But Valdrin was prepared. He rolled, grabbed something from his robes, and threw. Powder filled the air. Caspian inhaled before he could stop himself and felt his limbs turn to water. He crashed to the ground, his wolf form flickering, his body refusing to respond. Wolf's bane, concentrated, inhaled. He could not move, could not shift back, could only watch as Valdrin rose, retrieved his blade, and turned toward Sorel. "Now," Valdrin said calmly, "we finish what should have been finished 23 years ago." Sorel pressed herself against the wall. Her eyes found Caspian's. And then she did something impossible. She spoke. The Luna's vow poured from her lips, but this time it was different. This time she knew what she was saying. This time she meant it. The words filled the room like light, like fire, like something ancient and unstoppable. Valdrin screamed. Caspian felt the bond snap into place like a key turning in a lock. Felt strength flood back into his limbs. Felt his wolf rise, stabilized, controlled, and complete. He shifted back to human form and stood. Valdrin was on his knees, hands pressed to his ears, blood streaming from his nose. "It is done," Sorel said quietly. "The bond is complete." Caspian looked at her. This woman who had just saved his life, who had spoken the sacred words with full knowledge and full intention. Who had chosen him? "Guards?" he called. They came. They took Valdrin away. Then it was quiet. Sorel slid down the wall and sat on the floor, trembling. Caspian crossed to her and knelt. "You did it," he said. She looked up at him. Her eyes were full of tears. "He killed my mother," she whispered. "For 30 years, he watched you suffer. For 30 years, he manipulated everyone, and you saved me." Caspian cupped her face in his hands, gently, reverently. "You saved us both." The tears spilled over. Sorel leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. Caspian held her. And for the first time in 15 years, his wolf was silent, peaceful, and whole. The night after Valdrin's arrest, Sorel could not sleep. She lay in her chambers staring at the painted ceiling, listening to Lyrian's soft breathing. The child slept peacefully, exhausted from the terror of the day, but Sorel's mind would not quiet. The bond hummed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. She could feel Caspian somewhere in the palace, could sense his presence like warmth at the edge of her awareness. It should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified her. Everything had happened so fast. The confrontation, the words, the bond snapping into place like chains she had not chosen to wear. She had saved him, yes. But in doing so, she had bound herself to him forever. A knock sounded at her door. Soft, hesitant. Sorel rose quietly and crossed to answer it. A woman stood in the corridor, middle-aged, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. Lady Maren, wife of Lord Harvin, one of the few nobles who had not looked at Sorel with open contempt. "Forgive me for disturbing you," Lady Maren whispered, "but I had to speak with you. Alone." Sorel hesitated. "What about your mother?" Lady Maren's eyes glistened. I was her lady-in-waiting. I was there the night she died. Sorel's breath caught. She glanced back at Lyrian, still sleeping, then stepped into the corridor. "Tell me," she said. "Not here." Lady Marin looked down the corridor nervously. Even now, with Valdrin imprisoned, his allies remain. She touched Sorel's arm. "Please, come with me. There is something you need to see. Something your mother left behind." "What?" "A letter. Hidden in the old Luna chambers. Valdrin never found it. Your mother wrote it the night she died. She wanted you to know the truth." Sorel's blood was pounding. She thought about waking Lyrian, about finding Caspian. But this was her mother, her truth, her birthright. She followed. Lady Marin led her through corridors Sorel did not recognize, down staircases that grew narrower and colder. The torches grew sparse. The shadows grew thick. Something felt wrong. Sorel slowed. "Where are we going?" "Nearly there." Lady Marin's voice had changed. Harder. Colder. Sorel stopped completely. "Show me the letter." Lady Marin turned. Her kind expression was gone. In its place was something cold and empty. "There is no letter," Lady Marin said quietly. "But there is a debt. Valdrin saved my husband's family from ruin 20 years ago. We owe him everything." She smiled, and it was the coldest thing Sorel had ever seen. He asked only one thing in return: that if he ever failed, we would finish what he started. Sorel reached for the knife at her belt. It was not there. "Looking for this?" Lady Marin held up the blade that grandmother had given her. "I took it while we walked." Sorel backed away. "The Luna line ends tonight," Lady Marin said, "as it should have ended 23 years ago." She raised the knife. Sorel ran. She crashed through a door and found herself in a chamber with no windows. A dead end. Lady Marin appeared in the doorway, blocking the only exit. "Your mother ran too," she said. "The night she died. Do you know what Valdrin told her?" Sorel pressed herself against the wall. "Stay away from me." He told her that her daughter would die in ignorance, that she would never know what she was, that the Luna bloodline would fade into nothing. Lady Marin stepped closer. He was wrong about the ignorance, but the dying part, that he got right. She lunged. Sorel screamed, and the wall behind her exploded. Stone and dust filled the air. A massive shape burst through, silver fur catching the torchlight, eyes blazing with fury. Caspian. He crashed into Lady Marin, sending her flying across the chamber. The knife clattered to the floor. Sorel dove for it and pressed herself into the corner. But something was wrong. Caspian's wolf was staggering. His movements were uncoordinated. He shifted back to human form and nearly collapsed, catching himself on the wall. His other hand was pressed against his side. Blood seeped between his fingers. "No." Sorel crossed to him. "No. No. No." She found him. Caspian's voice was strained. Lady Marin. She had another blade, poisoned. He looked at Sorel, and his silver eyes were already dimming. "I felt you through the bond. Your fear. I ran. But I was not fast enough. You are bleeding. It does not matter." He cupped her face with his bloody hand. "You are safe. That is what matters." Sorel looked at the wound. The blood was too dark, spreading too fast. "You need a healer," she said desperately. "There is no time." Caspian's legs buckled. He slid down the wall, still holding her face. "The bond. It goes both ways now. You can feel what I feel. Do not do this." Tears were streaming down her face. "Do not leave me. I just found you." "Sorel." His voice was barely a whisper. "You saved me once. In the tower. With the words, 'I cannot save you from this.'" "Yes." He smiled, soft and tired. "You can." "How?" "The bond." Caspian's hand fell from her face. "Complete it. Fully. Let me in." "I do not know how." "Yes, you do." His fingers found hers, weak but certain. You have always known. Grandmother taught you. The old songs. Sing. Sorel stared at him. The old songs. The ones grandmother had sung every night. The ones that had no words she understood but felt true in her bones. She opened her mouth. And she sang. The melody rose from somewhere deep inside her, ancient and powerful. She sang, and the bond between them blazed to life, not just connection, but fusion, her strength flowing into him, her heart beating for both of them. She sang until her throat was raw. She sang until the blood stopped spreading. She sang until Caspian's eyes opened again, silver and clear and full of tears. Sorel, he breathed. She collapsed against him, sobbing. Behind them, guards finally arrived. They found Lady Marin unconscious, the poisoned blade, the blood, the king and his Luna tangled together on the floor. They found a story they would tell for generations. The night the Luna saved the king with nothing but her voice. Caspian woke to sunlight and the sound of a child singing. He lay still for a moment, cataloging sensations. Soft bed, warm blankets, a dull ache in his side. And beneath all of it, steady as a second heartbeat, the bond. Sorel. He turned his head and found her. She was asleep in the chair beside his bed, her head tilted at an angle that would leave her neck aching when she woke. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hand rested on the edge of his mattress, fingers stretched toward him. The singing continued from somewhere beyond the door. Lyrian's voice, high and sweet, butchering a melody that sounded vaguely like a drinking song. Caspian smiled. The movement must have disturbed Sorel because her eyes opened. For a moment she simply looked at him. Then relief crashed across her features. "You are awake." Her voice cracked. 3 days. The healers were not certain. 3 days? The poison was strong. She swallowed hard. If the bond had not, he caught her hands. Held them. "I am here." Sorel stared at him. Then, without warning, she hit his shoulder. Hard. "You fool." Tears were streaming down her face. "You absolute fool. You ran through a wall. I could not let her hurt you. You could have called the guards." Sorel. He said her name quietly and she stopped. "I felt your terror through the bond. There was no time for anything except reaching you." She was shaking. He could feel it through the bond. He tugged her gently toward him. "Sit. I will hurt you." "You will not." She sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were still in his. Her eyes were red. "Lady Marin," she said quietly. "What happened to her?" "Imprisoned. Awaiting trial alongside Valdrin." Caspian's jaw tightened. She confessed everything. "And the others? His allies?" "Being rooted out. General Torvern has taken command of the investigation." Caspian met her eyes. "It will take time, but we will find them all." Sorel nodded. Then she said, "The bond. When I sang, I felt everything?" "Yes." She looked away. "I felt what you felt." "For me, how long since the village?" Caspian's voice was soft. "Since you walked into my path and demanded I release the children. Since you looked at me like I was just a man, not a monster." "You are not a monster. I know that now." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Because of you." Sorel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of this." She gestured between them. "Of what it means. I was a village healer 3 weeks ago. Now I am supposed to be a Luna. A queen. I do not know how to be those things. You do not have to know." Caspian sat up slowly. "You only have to be yourself. The rest we figure out together." Together. She tested the word. "I told you once that you were free to leave whenever you wished. That has not changed. But I am asking you now, not as a king, not because of the bond, but as a man who has spent his entire life alone." He lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest. "Stay. Not because you have to, because you want to." Sorel looked at him. Her autumn eyes were full of tears. "And if I want to," she whispered, "then I will spend every day of my life making certain you never regret it." She laughed, a wet, broken sound. "That is a very long commitment." "I am aware." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. "I thought you were dying. In that chamber. I thought I was going to lose you before I ever really had you. You have me." Caspian tilted his head, his lips a breath from hers. "You have always had me." She kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative. Then his hand found the back of her neck, and hers fisted in his shirt, and the kiss deepened into something fierce and desperate. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. The door creaked open. "Are you done being romantic?" Lyrian asked. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "Because I have been waiting very patiently, and I think I deserve breakfast." Caspian laughed. The sound surprised him. "Come here, little one," he said. Lyrian bounded across the room and launched herself onto the bed. Sorel yelped, but Caspian caught the child and pulled her close, ignoring the spike of pain. "You scared everyone," Lyrian informed him. Sorel cried. "I cried. Even the grumpy general cried, though he said it was allergies. I apologize." "You should." Lyrian settled against his side. "Does this mean we are staying? Forever?" Caspian looked at Sorel. Sorel looked back. "Yes," Sorel said softly. "We are staying. Forever." Lyrian beamed. "Good." She looked up at Caspian with solemn eyes. "Does this mean you are my father now?" Caspian's throat tightened. "If you will have me," he said. Lyrian considered this, then she nodded. "I will have you," she said, "but you have to teach me to fight. And let me have a wolf. And never make me eat turnips. I accept your terms." Lyrian grinned and hugged him hard. Over the child's copper hair his eyes found Sorel's. She was crying again, but smiling through the tears. "Home," his wolf whispered contentedly. "Pack. Family. Complete." For the first time in his entire life, Caspian agreed. 6 months later, the kingdom gathered to witness something that had not happened in 23 years, a Luna coronation. Sorel stood at the entrance to the great hall, her heart pounding. The gown she wore was the color of autumn leaves, gold and copper and deep brown, embroidered with wolves and moons in silver thread. A circlet rested on her brow, delicate and ancient, pulled from a vault where it had waited for her since the night her mother died. "You look like you might faint," Brindis observed. "I might," Sorel admitted. The older woman smiled. "Your mother looked the same way. On her coronation day. Terrified." "Did she faint?" "No." Brindis adjusted Sorel's circlet slightly. "She walked down that aisle like she owned the entire kingdom. And then she tripped on the last step and fell directly into your father's arms." Sorel laughed, some of the tension easing. The doors began to open. "You have her strength," Brindis said quietly. "Never doubt that." Sorel stepped into the light. The great hall was transformed. Thousands of candles burned along the walls. The entire court had assembled, nobles and soldiers and servants, all turned toward the aisle where Sorel now walked. She saw faces she recognized. General Torvren, Lord Harvin's son, who had denounced his parents and sworn loyalty to the crown. Servants who had helped her. Guards who had protected her. And at the far end of the hall, waiting at the altar, Caspian. He was dressed in black and silver, the colors of House Thornmark. His silver eyes found hers across the length of the hall, and everything else disappeared. She walked toward him. Not a village healer anymore. Not a frightened girl hiding her bloodline. A Luna, a queen, a woman who had faced death and chosen love. She reached the altar. Caspian extended his hand. She took it. The high priestess spoke the traditional words. ancient blessings in the old tongue that Sorel now understood. She made her vows. Caspian made his. Then it was done. The hall erupted into cheers. Caspian pulled her close and kissed her in front of the entire kingdom. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a declaration, a promise, a claim. Sorel kissed him back just as fiercely. When they finally parted, Lyrian appeared at their side, wearing a gown of deep green and a circlet that matched Sorel's. Finally, the child announced, "I was getting bored." The court laughed. Caspian swept Lyrian up with one arm, keeping Sorel close with the other. "My Luna," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. "My daughter. My family." Sorel looked at him, at Lyrian beaming between them, at the future stretching out bright and impossible and real. "My king," she said softly, "my home." They stood together at the window of their chambers that night, Lyrian asleep in the adjoining room, the kingdom spread out below them beneath a sky full of stars. "I used to stand here alone," Caspian said quietly, "every night, looking out at everything I was supposed to protect, feeling nothing but empty." Sorel leaned against him. "And now? Now I feel everything." He turned her in his arms. "Because of you." She reached up and traced the scar along his jaw. "I was so afraid," she admitted, "when I first came here. Afraid of you. Afraid of what I was supposed to become. And now? Now I know that I did not lose myself." Her eyes met his. "I found myself. I found you. I found Lyrian. I found home." Caspian kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and the corner of her mouth. "The old songs," he murmured. "The ones your grandmother taught you. Will you teach them to Lyrian?" Sorel smiled. "I already have. She is learning faster than I did." "Of course she is." Caspian laughed. "She is terrifying. She learned from the best." He pulled her closer, and they stood in silence, watching the moon rise over the mountains. "I love you," Sorel said. The words came easily now. She had spoken them 100 times in the past 6 months, but each time still felt like the first. Caspian pressed his lips to her hair. "I love you," he said. "My Luna, my mate, my home." Somewhere in the next room, Lyrian stirred. They both turned, listening. A moment later, the child padded through the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "I had a dream," she announced, "about wolves and moons and a really big cake." Caspian lifted her easily. "A really big cake? Enormous." Lyrian yawned. "Can we have cake for breakfast?" "Absolutely not," Sorel said. "We will discuss it," Caspian said at the same time. Sorel glared at him. He smiled innocently. Lyrian settled against his shoulder, already half asleep again. "I love you," she mumbled. "Both of you. Forever." Sorel felt her heart expand into something larger, something that could hold all of this. This man, this child, this impossible, beautiful life. Forever, she agreed. Caspian met her eyes over Lyrian's copper hair. "Forever," he echoed. Outside, the moon hung full and bright over the kingdom of Thornmark. Inside, the Luna Queen stood with her king and their daughter, complete at last. And in the mountains far away, where wildflowers grew over grandmother's ashes, the wind carried the echo of old songs. Songs of wolves and moons and love. Songs of home. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. These stories only exist because of you. Because you listen, you comment, you share. And that means more than I can say. I am so grateful you are here.